The message flashed on my screen, a sharp, cold jab to the gut. It wasn't from them, not direct. It was from Sarah, my cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey Alex," it read. "Just saw the family chat. Looks like they finally got rid of your old number." My heart actually stopped. Like someone hit the pause button on my entire world. My old number? I hadn't changed my number in 10 years. My number was the same number they all had. The one I'd used to send a happy birthday message to my mom just last week. A message that went unanswered. A cold dread spread through me, chilling my veins. The family group chat. That was our central hub, the digital campfire where we shared everything. Jokes, memes, holiday plans, medical updates, baby pictures, arguments, make-up apologies. It was the constant hum in the background of my life, the reassurance that no matter how messy things got, we were still a unit. Or so I thought. I scrolled through my phone, frantically searching for it. The family clan I'd named it, with a little shield emoji. It wasn't there. Not in my main chat list, not in my archived chats. It was gone. Completely. I scrolled back, tracing our last conversations. My last message was a photo of a funny dog I'd seen, sent on a Tuesday, 3 weeks ago. And after that, nothing. No replies, no new messages from them, just an echoing silence. Panic, hot and urgent, flooded my chest. Had I accidentally deleted it? No, I was always careful with my phone. Had they created a new one and forgotten to add me? Unlike my siblings, Emily and Ben, were meticulous about these things. My parents, usually quick to check in if I'd been quiet for a while. This felt different. This felt intentional. I typed in a quick message to Emily. "Hey, is the family clan chat gone for you too? I can't find it." I waited. The 3 dots appeared. She was typing. My breath hitched. Hope flickered, frail and uncertain. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe she'd explain. Then the dots disappeared. Nothing. No message. She'd seen it. She'd started to reply and then she'd stopped. My hands started to tremble. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act. But why? Why me? We'd had our share of squabbles, every family does. But nothing that warranted being erased, uninvited, ghosted from the very core of our shared digital existence. I thought back to the last time I saw them, at Dad's birthday dinner a few months ago. It had been a bit tense. I disagreed with Ben about his new business venture, which I thought was risky and ill-conceived. My parents had sided with him, as they often did. Emily had just stayed quiet, picking at her food. Was that it? A simple disagreement. They'd cut me out for that. I tried my mom next. My mom, who always used to say I was her sensitive one, her thoughtful one. "Mom, can you add me back to the family chat, please? It's gone from my phone, sent. Read." No reply. Just like Emily, it was like I was screaming into a void. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just accidentally removed me. They had actively, purposefully, created a new family chat. A chat without me. And Sarah, my usually observant cousin, had just stumbled upon it. My stomach churned. The old number excuse was a lie. A flimsy excuse concocted to avoid any confrontation. They didn't want to explain. They just wanted me gone. The worst part, the truly shocking part, came a few hours later. I was still reeling, staring blankly at my phone when my phone rang. It was Sarah again. "Hey Alex," she said, her voice a little hesitant. "Look, I feel bad telling you this, but I think you should know. When I said they got rid of your old number, I meant they put in a new person instead of you." My heart plummeted. "What do you mean?" I choked up. Well, she said, I was talking to Aunt Carol, you know, Mom's sister, and she mentioned the family squad chat, a new one. And she said that your cousin Mark from your dad's side, you know, Mark who just moved back to the city after years abroad. She said he's in it. She thought he was a good replacement for you because he's so upbeat and less prone to drama. The words hung in the air, mocking me. Mark who I hadn't seen since we were kids. Mark, who was notoriously flaky and self-centered. Mark, who had replaced me. Less prone to drama? Was that what they thought of me? As drama? I tried to remember the last time I'd caused drama. It was so subjective. My concerns about Ben's business. My suggestions for holiday plans that differed from Emily's. My candid opinions on family politics? Was that drama? Or was it just being myself? The pain was excruciating. It wasn't just being excluded. It was being replaced. It was a clear, unambiguous statement. You are no longer wanted. Someone else is better suited for our family unit than you are. The family, my blood, the people I had always relied on, had collectively decided I was expendable. They had simply cut me out like a cancerous growth and seamlessly filled the void with someone they deemed more suitable. I ended the call with Sarah quickly, barely managing a thank you. My mind raced, trying to process this level of cold, calculated rejection. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't an argument where harsh words were exchanged. It was a silent, total excommunication. No warning, no discussion, no chance to defend myself or understand. Just gone and replaced. I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cage. The silence was deafening, amplified by the sudden void where the constant background hum of family connection used to be. For years I had been the one to organize family events, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, the one who checked in when someone was sick. I was the glue, or at least I thought I was. Now I was just gone, replaced by Mark. Mark, who probably didn't even know half the family's inside jokes, who wouldn't understand the complex dynamics, who would just nod and smile and be upbeat. A wave of bitter anger washed over the initial heartbreak. How could they? How could my own family do this? The feeling of being utterly alone discarded and replaced was a heavy cloak settling around my shoulders. This wasn't just a group chat, this was a statement. And the statement was loud and clear. You don't belong here anymore. And in that moment, as the pain began to morph into something harder, something colder, I knew I couldn't just sit there and take it. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. And it would be a choice that echoed their betrayal, a choice that would hit them where it hurt the most. The days that followed blurred into a miserable haze. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach. The first thought always, they replaced me. And then the immediate follow-up, why? My mind spun on a loop, sifting through every interaction, every argument, every perceived slight. Was it when I suggested we rotate holiday hosting duties, instead of always having it at Mom and Dad's? Emily had scoffed, saying I was just trying to avoid work. Was it when I tried to offer advice to Ben about his shady-looking investment opportunity, suggesting he look into the company's background more thoroughly? He dismissed me, saying I was always a pessimist. And my parents, they just patted Ben on the shoulder, telling me to be supportive of his dreams. It seemed like every time I expressed an opinion that wasn't perfect agreement, I was labeled difficult or negative. I thought I was just being realistic or offering a different perspective. But perhaps in their bubble of forced positivity, I was the inconvenient truth teller, the one who poked holes in their carefully constructed reality. I remembered a specific incident from last Christmas. Emily had bought my mom a really expensive designer handbag. It was beautiful, but Mom already had 3 similar ones. I'd casually mentioned that Mom had really wanted a new set of gardening tools. Something practical, and she'd actually use. Emily had snapped at me saying I was always trying to one-up her, and that my gifts were boring. My parents had just chuckled, saying Emily was so generous. I walked away feeling like my efforts, my actual listening to what Mom wanted, were less valued than a showy, expensive gift. The ice wall around me solidified. My calls to my parents went straight to voicemail. My texts to Emily and Ben remained unanswered. Even after showing as read, it was a complete and utter blockade. They weren't just angry, they were gone, and they wanted me to know it. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a complete severing. The thought of Mark, the replacement, gnawed at me. Mark, who used to borrow my toys and break them without apology. Mark, who told embarrassing stories about me at family gatherings, knowing I hated attention. He was the epitome of surface-level charm, always laughing loudly, always agreeing, never rocking the boat. Of course they'd want him. He was easy. He was a blank slate for their ideal family member. I spent hours scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of us as kids. Me, Emily, Ben, arms around each other, laughing. Family vacations, Christmases, birthdays, we were so close. Or I thought we were. What had changed? Was it me or them? It felt like a slow, insidious erosion, a gradual pulling away that I hadn't truly noticed until the final, brutal cut. The pain was no longer just a sharp jab. It was a dull, constant ache. It permeated everything. My work suffered. I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, unable to focus. My friends noticed. "You seem off, Alex," they'd say. "Everything okay?" I'd just mumble something about stress, unable to articulate the profound emptiness I felt. How do you explain that your entire family has simply decided you no longer existed? One evening I tried one last, desperate attempt at contact. I wrote a long message to the family chat, the non-existent one, of course. I just typed it into my notes app. It was raw, honest. I talked about how hurt I was, how confused. I asked what I had done to deserve such a silent, brutal exile. I pleaded for an explanation, for a chance to talk. I poured out my heart, every insecurity, every desperate longing for connection. Then I selected it all, and I deleted it. I knew sending it would be pointless. They wouldn't read it. Or, if they did, they would dismiss it as drama. The coldness I felt was deeper than sadness. It was the feeling of a profound injustice. All my life I'd been there for them. When Emily struggled with her first job, I helped her rework her resume and practiced interview questions with her for hours. When Ben got into a car accident, I was the first one at the scene, helping him deal with the insurance and the police. When my parents had a health scare, I was the one doing research, arranging appointments, and staying overnight at the hospital. I had always been the dependable one, the quiet pillar they could lean on. And now I was nothing. Worse than nothing, I was a problem to be erased. The worst part of it was the silence, the complete and utter lack of communication. If they had screamed at me, told me what I did wrong, accused me of terrible things, at least then there would be something to react to, something to fight against. But this was a void, a black hole of rejection that swallowed every attempt I made to bridge it. The anger simmered beneath the surface of my grief. It was a slow burn, fueled by every unanswered call, every read message, every memory of their casual dismissiveness. They had decided I wasn't worthy of their time, their explanation, or even a simple goodbye. They had simply moved on, replacing me with a more convenient version of a family member. And then one particularly bleak morning, as I sat drinking my coffee, staring at the empty space on my phone where the family clan used to be, a thought sparked. A cold, hard, defiant thought. They had chosen to cut me out of their present and their future emotional lives. But what about their future financial lives? I remembered a conversation with my father years ago when he'd encouraged me to get life insurance. "Always be prepared, son," he'd said. "Make sure your loved ones are taken care of." And dutifully I had. And who were the beneficiaries? My parents, Emily and Ben, my loved ones. The very same people who had just thrown me out of their lives like yesterday's trash. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. The idea solidified, crystallizing into a clear, compelling path forward. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming my agency. It was about demonstrating, in a way, they would undeniably understand the real-world consequences of their actions. They had chosen to replace me, and now I would choose to replace them. Not with another family member, but with someone or something that truly deserved my future. The spark of retribution, cold and steady, had been lit. The spark ignited on that cold morning quickly grew into a steady flame. I was no longer just grieving, I was angry. Quiet, simmering rage that lent me a strange sort of clarity. I saw everything through a new lens. Every memory of their casual dismissiveness. Every time I had put their needs before my own. Every instance of me being the steady, reliable one they took for granted. It all fueled my resolve. My daily routine became a struggle. Getting out of bed felt like lifting a 100-pound weight. Food tasted like ash. My apartment felt suffocating. I tried to distract myself with work, but my focus was shattered. Meetings felt meaningless, emails piled up, and my usual efficiency evaporated. My boss, a kind but busy woman, eventually called me into our office. "Alex," she said gently, "is everything all right? You seem a bit preoccupied lately." I mumbled something about personal issues, my throat tight. She just nodded, her eyes full of concern, and told me to take some time if I needed it. I did take some time, but not the kind she expected. Instead of resting, I found myself pacing, thinking, plotting. My mind was consumed by the injustice of it all. I replayed conversations in my head, analyzing every word. Did I misinterpret something? Was there a hidden meaning I missed? Damn number. It was always the same conclusion. They had simply decided I was a burden, a source of drama, and had found someone upbeat to fill my shoes. The profound betrayal wasn't just about the chat. It was about years of presumed closeness, of shared history, of a bond I thought was unbreakable. It was about the future I had envisioned with them. Holidays, milestones, growing old together. All of it shattered by a simple digital exclusion and a casual replacement. Then came the trigger event. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. I received a forwarded email from Emily's husband, Mark. Not the new Mark, but her actual husband. It was an old email chain about family financial contributions for our parents' house repairs. My name was still on it, listed as contributing a significant sum for the new roof from last year. I had paid my share, of course. No questions asked. But seeing my name there, in an email forwarded to me by an in-law, while my own siblings wouldn't even answer my texts, was a cruel joke. They were happy to take my money, happy to let me be the dependable one for their financial burdens, but not happy enough to keep me in their daily lives. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The anger that had been simmering finally boiled over, not into a furious rage, but into a chilling calm. They wanted me out. Fine, but they wouldn't get everything. Not anymore. My thoughts drifted to conversations I'd had with Dad about financial planning. He was always big on being prepared. Life insurance, son had advised me years ago when I started my first proper job. It's not for you, it's for them. For the ones you leave behind, to make sure they're taken care of. I remembered signing those papers, young and optimistic, putting down my parents, Emily and Ben, as my primary beneficiaries. A substantial amount, enough to make a real difference. Enough to cover significant debts, or a down payment on a house, or a comfortable few years of living expenses. I had envisioned it as a final act of love and responsibility, a way to ensure their security even after I was gone. The irony was unbearable. They wanted nothing to do with me alive, but they were perfectly set to benefit from my death. The thought was sickening. And then the idea, born from the depths of my hurt and anger, solidified into a clear, undeniable directive. They had replaced me in their lives. I would replace them in my death. The thought didn't bring immediate comfort, but it brought a perverse sense of control. This was something I could do. This was something I had power over. They had removed me from their narrative. Now, I could remove them from mine in a way that would leave an undeniable mark. It wouldn't be about screening or begging for their attention. It would be a quiet, decisive act. An act of financial removal that would speak louder than any words. I got up from the table, the old email still glowing on my laptop screen. My hands were steady. My heart, still aching, had hardened. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about reclaiming my dignity, about setting boundaries that they had so carelessly trampled. They had decided I was no longer family. I would ensure that decision had consequences they could never ignore. Who would I choose instead? The question lingered, but it wasn't a priority yet. The first step was to understand the process. The first step was to take back control. The victim mentality that had plagued me for weeks began to recede, replaced by a steely resolve. I was no longer passively hurt. I was actively deciding my future, and their future too, in a way they wouldn't expect. The game had changed, and I was the one moving the pieces now. The next few days were dedicated to what I grimly called the quiet research. I needed to understand every aspect of my life insurance policy, every clause, every procedure for changing beneficiaries. This wasn't a rash, emotional decision anymore. It was a calculated, deliberate act. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to understand the full implications. My policy documents were stored in a folder in my home office, tucked away behind old tax returns. I pulled them out, the thick sheaf of papers feeling strangely heavy in my hands. Terms, beneficiary, primary, contingent, irrevocable swam before my eyes. I focused on the sections about changing beneficiaries. Now it seemed straightforward enough. Fill out a form, provide identification, sign, and submit. But I wanted to be absolutely certain there were no hidden pitfalls, no way for them to contest it later. I spent hours online researching life insurance laws in my state, looking up common mistakes people make when changing beneficiaries, and ensuring my current policy was not irrevocable, meaning I hadn't set it up in a way that required current beneficiaries' consent to change them. Thankfully, it wasn't. It was a standard revocable policy. I could change it at will. A small, cold wave of satisfaction washed over me. While I was doing this, the silence from my family continued. Not a single text, not a single call. It was as if I had truly ceased to exist in their world. This lack of any attempt at reconciliation, any glimmer of explanation, only solidified my resolve. The silence was speaking volumes, louder than any angry words. It was saying, We don't care enough to even tell you why we cut you out. During my research, I also stumbled upon old family financial records. My parents had always been a little disorganized with finances, and I had often stepped in to help. I found copies of bank statements, utility bills, and even some medical expenses from years ago. I noticed a pattern. Whenever there was a large unexpected expense, I was usually the first one they called. Alex, can you float us some money until next month? Or Alex, your sister needs help with her rent this month. I had always helped. Always, without question, without expecting anything in return. I just wanted to be there for them, to ease their burdens. I saw the receipt for Mom's surgery a few years back. Part that wasn't covered by insurance, the part I quietly paid. I saw the receipts for Ben's college tuition when he struggled to get grants. The payments I sent, without his knowledge, routed through my parents. I saw the records of the loan I'd given Emily for her first car, a loan that was never repaid, and I never chased it. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the expectation. Comfortable assumption that I would always be there, always provide, always be a safety net, while simultaneously being deemed too much drama for their group chat. The cold anger hardened into ice. This wasn't just about a group chat. This was about years of emotional exploitation, of being taken for granted, of being seen as a resource rather than a cherished family member. They had cultivated a relationship where my utility was valued over my personhood. And now that my presence was inconvenient, I was disposable. The question of new beneficiaries began to take shape. I considered a few options. Charity I deeply believed in, one that supported mental health awareness. A cause close to my heart, given how difficult these past weeks had been. Perhaps a good friend, Sarah, who had reached out, who had shown genuine concern. She deserved it more than any of them, or even a local animal shelter. Something completely unrelated to my family. Something that would cause them to scratch their heads and realize just how far I'd moved from their orbit. I decided against leaving it to a single person. While Sarah was a good friend, I didn't want to burden her with such a large sum, or put her in an awkward position with my family if they ever found out. A charity felt right. It was impersonal enough that it couldn't be traced back to any personal vendetta, but deeply meaningful to me. It represented a future where my resources would benefit something good, something that genuinely made a difference, unlike how they had been used by my family. I printed out the beneficiary change forms from my insurance company's website. The forms were simple, almost deceptively so. Just a few lines to fill in. Old beneficiaries, new beneficiaries, signatures. Each blank space on the form felt heavy with meaning, a silent declaration of independence. I sat at my desk, the forms spread out before me. My pen hovered over the lines where my family's names were currently listed. My parents, Emily, Ben, the names that once represented love and belonging, now felt like a curse, a reminder of the deepest betrayal. This act, this quiet administrative task, felt more profound than any grand gesture. It was my way of taking back control, of rewriting my own story, and determining my own legacy. They had chosen to erase me from their present. I would erase them from my future, and it would be a consequence they would someday feel. The act of changing the beneficiaries felt both mundane and monumental. I had printed the forms, researched the process, and now came the moment of execution. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. It wasn't out of fear, but from the immense weight of the decision. This wasn't just paper. It was a definitive line drawn in the sand. I carefully filled out the first section, the policy details. Then came the part for current beneficiaries. I wrote their names, my mother's full name, my father's full name, Emily's full name, Ben's full name. Each stroke of the pen felt like a surgical incision, severing a tie that I had believed was blood deep and unbreakable. It hurt, a dull ache in my chest, a phantom limb sensation for a connection that was no longer there. Then, the section for new beneficiaries. I had decided on a specific charity. Not just any charity, but one that supported education and empowerment for underprivileged youth. It was a cause that aligned with my values, with the idea of giving people tools to build their own future. Something I realized I had always tried to do for my family, only to be dismissed. This charity represented hope, growth, and self-sufficiency. Values that had been conspicuously absent in my recent interactions with my family. I wrote the charity's name, its address, and its tax identification number. I made sure to allocate the full amount to them, clearly and unambiguously. As I signed my name at the bottom of the form, witnessed by a notary at my bank as required, a strange sense of liberation washed over me. It was a quiet triumph. No fanfare, no confrontation, just a simple act of redirecting my future. The paperwork was done. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to the insurance company, and walked to the post office. Dropping the envelope into the mail slot felt like dropping a heavy burden I hadn't fully realized I was carrying. It wasn't about bitterness anymore, or at least not just bitterness. It was about asserting my autonomy, about making a choice that was entirely mine, free from the expectations and manipulations of my family. The days that followed were still difficult, but different. The constant churning in my stomach had lessened. The relentless why me loop in my head had quieted. I still felt the pangs of loss, the echo of a family that was no longer mine, but it was overlaid with a new sense of purpose. I had taken action. I had reclaimed a piece of myself. I began to focus on other aspects of my life. I started cooking again, experimenting with new recipes that had previously felt too much effort. I rediscovered my love for hiking, spending weekends on trails, letting the quiet of nature soothe my wounded spirit. They were the chosen family, the ones who showed up without expecting anything in return. One evening I received a text from my cousin Sarah, the one who had inadvertently alerted me to the new chat. "Hey Alex," she wrote. "Are you coming to Aunt Carol's potluck next month? Mom says it's a family thing." My heart gave a familiar pang. Aunt Carol was Mom's sister, meaning my parents would be there, Emily, Ben, the whole crew. The family thing I was no longer a part of, yet was still, ironically, invited to by proxy through a distant relative. I paused, considering my response. For weeks, my automatic reaction would have been a desperate need to go, to try and force a confrontation, to demand answers, but not anymore. I felt the quiet strength that had grown within me since I filled out those forms. "Thanks, Sarah," I typed back, "but I'll have to miss it. I've made other plans. No explanation, no apology, no begging, just a simple, firm statement. My plans were to protect my peace, to continue healing, to build a life where I was not reliant on their conditional love." Sending that text felt almost as powerful as mailing the insurance form. It was another brick in the wall I was building around my newly protected self. It wasn't about punishing them, not directly. It was about freeing myself. It was about recognizing that my worth was not determined by their acceptance, and my future was mine to design. I still sometimes imagine the moment they would find out. The shock, the anger, the inevitable accusations. But that wasn't my problem anymore. My problem was to live my life, to heal, and to ensure that if anything ever happened to me, my legacy would truly go to those who deserved it. To a cause that genuinely uplifted others, not to the people who had so cruelly cast me aside. The sign forms were tucked away now, safe, their power silent but potent, waiting for a future that was entirely on my terms. Weeks turned into months. The silence from my family became a new normal, a heavy blanket that sometimes suffocated, but often provided a strange sort of peace. My initial desperation had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. They weren't coming back, and I wasn't going to beg. I continued to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. I threw myself into my work, focusing on projects with a renewed sense of purpose. I even started taking an evening class in photography, something I'd always wanted to do. It was a space where I could create, where I could focus on beauty and perspective, rather than the ugly reality of my fractured family. My circle of friends became my lifeline. Sarah, my cousin, continued to be a distant but kind presence. She'd occasionally text me, always careful not to mention family gatherings directly, but always inquiring about me. I appreciated her subtle support, her quiet understanding. But it was my close friends, people like David and Maria, who truly filled the void. We went for hikes, had weekly game nights, and just talked. They listened when I cautiously opened up about the family situation, offering empathy and outrage on my behalf. "Their loss, Alex," Maria would say, shaking her head. "You are a good person. They're missing out." Their validation, their unwavering support, slowly started to mend the gaping hole in my heart. The thought of the changed beneficiaries on my life insurance policy remained a quiet source of strength. It was my secret, my trump card, something that no one knew and no one needed to know. It wasn't about gloating or rubbing it in their faces. It was about taking control, about having the ultimate say in where my resources, my legacy would go. It gave me a sense of peace that I hadn't expected. I wasn't powerless. I had made a choice, a powerful one, and it was final. Sometimes, I'd accidentally stumble upon their social media. Emily posting pictures of a family dinner, my parents, Ben, his wife, and a smiling Mark. The replacement. Holding a baby I hadn't known existed, my niece or nephew, perhaps. A pang of raw grief would hit me then. Milestones, moments, memories, they were all happening without me. It hurt, it always would. But the hurt was now mixed with a detached sense of observation. They were moving on, seemingly happy without me. And I was doing the same. The casual dismissal was the hardest part to stomach. It wasn't anger or hatred I saw in their online presence, just a seamless continuation of life, as if I had never existed. It was the ultimate erasure. My parents looked happy. Ben seemed to be thriving. Emily was radiant, no sign of missing a piece of their puzzle. It reinforced the idea that I truly was drama, a burden they were happy to shed. I started to imagine the moment they would find out about the insurance. But the fantasy wasn't about their pain. Not really. It was about their shock. The realization that their actions had real-world, tangible consequences that went beyond hurt feelings. That their comfort, their future security, had been tied to my existence, and that I had, silently and deliberately, severed that tie. The thought wasn't vengeful but deeply satisfying. It was the quiet justice I craved. One day I received a text from my mom's sister, Aunt Carol. She usually only texted around holidays. This time it was a photo, a blurry picture of my parents on a beach somewhere smiling. "They're enjoying their vacation," she wrote. "So good to see them happy." No mention of me, no question about how I was. Just a casual update about the people she cared about. The people still in the family chat. It was another reminder of my exclusion. A subtle jab, perhaps unintentional on her part, but a jab nonetheless. I just replied with a thumbs up emoji. No need to explain. No need to point out the obvious. I had learned to internalize the pain, to process it without reacting. My silence was now my strength. I also noticed a subtle shift in my own perspective. I used to feel defined by my family, by my role within it. Now that identity had been stripped away, and I was forced to build a new one. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. I was Alex, and my worth was not contingent on their approval. My future, both in life and in death, was solely mine to decide. The beneficiaries on my life insurance policy were not a threat or a tool for manipulation. They were a testament to my new path. They represented my values, my priorities, and my newfound freedom. They were a quiet declaration that I was moving forward, creating a legacy that was truly my own, independent of the family, who had so casually chosen to erase me. The silence from them was deafening, but my own internal quiet was becoming louder, clearer, and more resolute. I was okay. I was getting there, and they had no idea. Life settled into a strange rhythm of normalcy. I was building a new routine, a new life, brick by painful brick. The raw wound of betrayal had scabbed over, though the scar tissue remained tender. I still thought about them, of course. Sometimes a song would play, or I'd see something that reminded me of an old inside joke, and a wave of nostalgia, tinged with a sharp pang of loss, would wash over me. But it was less frequent, less debilitating. I was at the grocery store one Saturday pushing my cart through the produce aisle when I saw her. Emily. My sister. She was with her 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both of whom had grown significantly since I last saw them. My breath caught in my throat. My niece and nephew, whom I hadn't hugged in over a year. She didn't see me at first. I considered turning around, pushing my cart down another aisle, avoiding the inevitable awkwardness. But then she turned, her eyes sweeping across the aisle and locked onto mine. Her face, usually so expressive, went blank. A flicker of surprise, then something else. Discomfort, perhaps even a hint of guilt. Alex, she said, her voice a little breathless, almost a whisper. Emily, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. I noticed her kids tugging on her clothes, looking up at her curiously. They didn't recognize me. How could they? I hadn't been in their lives for months. Long time no see, she managed, her gaze flitting nervously around the store, avoiding direct eye contact. It has been, I agreed, offering no further conversational bridge. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I wasn't going to beg for a conversation or an explanation. That was for the old Alex. How are you? She asked, a forced pleasantness in her tone. I'm well, I said, and you? Good, good, she said quickly, a little too quickly. Kids are good. Ben's good. Mom and Dad are good. She rattled off their well-being, as if to prove that their world was perfectly fine without me. I just nodded, my eyes meeting hers for a brief, intense moment. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the unspoken questions, the obvious elephant in the room that neither of us dared to acknowledge. Then, she added, almost as an afterthought, Mark's fitting in well with everyone. He's been a real breath of fresh air. The words were casual, but they hit me like a physical blow. A deliberate reminder, a confirmation of my replacement. She was still trying to justify their actions even now. A cold, calm response formed on my lips. That's good to hear, I said, my voice flat. I resisted the urge to ask. A breath of fresh air compared to what, Emily? To me? Instead, I simply added, well, it was good seeing you. And with that, I pushed my cart forward, leaving her standing there, a confused and slightly unnerved expression on her face. I walked away, my heart pounding. But a strange sense of empowerment settled over me. I hadn't caved. I hadn't demanded answers. I hadn't shown them how much they had hurt me. I had simply shown them that I was okay, that I was moving on, and that I didn't need their validation or their forced pleasantries. The encounter, though brief and painful, was a turning point. It proved to me how much I had changed. The old Alex would have been desperate for a sliver of connection, for an explanation, for a chance to bridge the chasm. The new Alex simply acknowledged the chasm and walked away, choosing his own path. It also made me realize that they were still trapped in their own narrative, one where I was the drama and Mark was the breath of fresh air. They hadn't grown. They hadn't reflected. They were still clinging to the convenient lie that justified their exclusion of me. Later that day, I sat on my couch, still replaying the encounter. The kids, the little ones who didn't know me, that was the most painful part. The severing wasn't just with my siblings and parents, but with the next generation too. A whole future of shared memories of being the cool uncle erased. But beneath the pain, there was a quiet strength. My decision about the life insurance beneficiaries felt even more righteous now. They had made their bed, they had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. My life, my assets, my legacy, it was all mine to direct now. They had given me a harsh gift, the gift of true independence, and I intended to use it fully. The encounter with Emily hadn't broken me. It had hardened my resolve. I was no longer seeking their approval. I was simply living my life on my terms. And the secret about my beneficiaries was a powerful, silent affirmation of that. News travels fast, even in estranged families. My brief, awkward encounter with Emily at the grocery store, though seemingly insignificant to me, must have been a topic of discussion in the family squad chat. I started to hear whispers, filtering through mutual acquaintances, about how Alex seemed different. "He's so quiet," one distant relative commented to Sarah, who then relayed it to me. "He's not his usual self, always joking around." It was an odd observation. My usual self was apparently only acceptable when it was convenient for them. My quietness was a sign of my healing, my detachment. But to them, it was a new, unsettling behavior. Couldn't understand that I wasn't performing for them anymore. Rumors began to circulate. Some were harmless, like Alex got a new job. I hadn't. Others were more speculative. Did Alex move? No, but I had considered it. And then, the more pointed ones, the ones that hinted at their underlying anxieties. "Is Alex doing okay financially?" This came from my Aunt Carol, who usually meant well, but had a tendency to gossip. This particular rumor made me raise an eyebrow. Financial stability. That was something they had always taken for granted about me. I was the reliable one, the one with the steady job, the one who always contributed more than his fair share. Was my sudden silence, my lack of engagement, making them nervous? Were they starting to question if their safety net was still intact? I imagined them in their chat, discussing me. He didn't come to Aunt Carol's potluck. He was so aloof at the grocery store. He seemed so closed off now. They were probably wondering why I wasn't chasing them anymore, why I wasn't trying to force my way back into their lives. My indifference, my composure, was clearly unsettling to them. Challenged their narrative of me being the drama that needed to be cut out. If I wasn't causing drama, and I wasn't begging for their attention, then what was I doing? And why wasn't I behaving according to their script? The true reason for my quiet strength, of course, remained my secret. The life insurance beneficiaries. It was a powerful silent weapon, one that I never intended to wield in anger, but merely to ensure justice. The thought that they might be casually discussing my financial well-being, while completely unaware of the future they had forfeited, brought a grim satisfaction. They were so focused on their immediate comfort, their perfect little squad, that they couldn't see the long-term consequences of their actions. One evening, I received a phone call from my mother. My breath hitched. It was the first direct contact from her in over 6 months. My hand hovered over the screen, 1,000 conflicting emotions swirling within me. Anger, hope, resentment, longing. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. It went to voicemail. I listened to it later. Her voice was hesitant, almost timid. "Alex," she said. "It's Mum. Just calling to see how you are. We haven't heard from you in a while. Everything all right?" No apology, no explanation for the silence. Just a vague, cautious inquiry, as if I was the one who had disappeared without a trace, not the other way around. I didn't call back. Her belated concern felt hollow. Too little, too late. It wasn't a genuine attempt at reconciliation. It felt more like an assessment, a check-in to see if I was still stable, still dependable, still potentially useful. The rumors escalated. Alex is dating someone new. Both untrue. The family seemed almost desperate to find a reason for my detachment. A simple explanation that didn't involve their own culpability. It was easier to believe I had moved on to new things than to confront the idea that they had fundamentally broken our bond. I found myself almost enjoying the mystery I had become to them. It was a reversal of power. They had sought to control my narrative by excluding me. But in doing so, they had lost control of it entirely. I was no longer the drama. I was the enigma. And their curiosity, their low-level anxiety about my new path, was a subtle form of payback. My determination hardened. I wouldn't seek them out. I wouldn't offer explanations. My life was moving forward, filled with new interests, new friends, and a growing sense of self-worth. They had chosen their path. I had chosen mine. And the quiet, powerful secret of my life insurance was the ultimate symbol of that choice. They might speculate about my financial state now, but one day they would truly understand the depth of what they had forfeited. And that understanding would be far more impactful than any argument or plea for reconciliation. It was coming, slowly, quietly, but inevitably. The quiet war of attrition continued for months. My family continued their life, seemingly oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred in mine. I, in turn, continued to build my new world, focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my chosen family of friends. The thought of them and my secret was a constant undercurrent, a quiet anticipation. I knew a moment of reckoning would come. I just didn't know how or when. It came in the form of an unexpected medical scare, not life-threatening, but serious enough to land me in the hospital for a few days. A sudden, sharp pain in my side, followed by a rush to the emergency room, and then surgery for a burst appendix. It was scary, a reminder of my own mortality, and a stark realization of how alone I truly was, despite my new circle of friends. David and Mariah were there, of course, bringing me food, checking on me. But the absence of my parents, my siblings, was a gaping void. Word, as always, got around. My boss called my emergency contact, which was my cousin Sarah, not my parents. A deliberate choice I had made months ago. Sarah, bless her heart, immediately called my Aunt Carol, and from there, the information filtered through the family grapevine. I was discharged from the hospital after a few days, weak but recovering. That afternoon my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer. But something compelled me. Perhaps it was the lingering vulnerability from the surgery. a small part of me still craving that old connection. Alex? Are you okay? I heard you were in the hospital. Her voice was laced with concern, a genuine worry I hadn't heard in ages. I am fine, Mum, I said, my voice hoarse. Just a burst appendix, recovering now. Oh, Alex, why didn't you tell us? She asked, a touch of accusation in her tone quickly shifting from concern to mild irritation. We're your family. We should know these things. The old anger flared. You made it pretty clear you didn't want to know these things, Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the pain. You made it clear you didn't want me in your lives. A beat of silence. Then, a defensive tone entered her voice. That's not fair, Alex. Things were difficult. You were a lot of drama. Drama? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. So, my opinions, my concerns, my honesty, that's drama to you. While you quietly cut me out and replaced me without a single word. We didn't replace you, Alex, she said, her voice rising in pitch. He's just a cousin. He's not you. He's in the family chat that I am not in. I stated, the words cold and precise. You decided I wasn't worth the effort. You decided someone else was more upbeat, fine. That was your choice. Another silence. Then she shifted tactics. Well, what about your life insurance, Alex? We were so worried when we heard you were in the hospital. If anything had happened, we wouldn't even know what to do. My heart gave a sudden, sharp jolt. This was it. The moment I had anticipated for months. Don't worry about my life insurance, Mom, I said, my voice calm, almost eerily so. That's all sorted. I made sure it's going to people who actually deserve it. People who stood by me, people who value me, and a cause that truly matters. The line went dead silent. No rustling, no breathing, just an empty, hollow quiet. Could almost hear the gears turning in her head. The dawning realization of what I was implying. The substantial sum, the years I'd paid into it, the fact that they were the original beneficiaries. And now they weren't. What do you mean, Alex? Her voice, when it came, was a tight, strained whisper. Who did you put down instead? That's no longer your concern, Mom, I said firmly. You decided I wasn't family. You decided I wasn't worth communicating with, even when I reached out repeatedly. You decided to erase me from your lives. So I decided to erase you from my future. It's a direct consequence of your actions. But that's our money, Alex. That was supposed to be for your parents, for your siblings. She practically wailed. The veneer of concern, completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated outrage and fear. No, Mom, I said, my voice unwavering. It was my money. And it's now going to people and places who genuinely need it and appreciate it. You taught me to be prepared, to take care of my loved ones, and I have. Just not the loved ones you think. I could hear her sputtering, then a frustrated gasp. You can't do that. We're your family. You had ample opportunity to act like family, I countered, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You chose not to. You chose to replace me, and I simply reciprocated. This isn't a threat, Mom. It's a fact. It's already done. The forms were submitted months ago. The phone went silent again, a long, agonizing pause. I knew what was happening on the other end. The shock, the anger, the immediate calculation of their loss. This was the consequence they hadn't anticipated. This was the moment their casual dismissal came back to haunt them. I need to go now, Mom, I said, my voice tired but resolute. I need to rest. I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up the phone. I lay back on my pillow, exhausted but strangely light. The truth was out. The secret was revealed. It wasn't a satisfying moment of revenge, not in the triumphant way I might have imagined. It was heartbreaking. Heartbreaking that it had come to this. Heartbreaking that their first real concern for me in months was immediately overshadowed by their financial expectations. But it was also liberating. The burden of my secret was lifted, and the consequences of their actions were now unequivocally laid bare. The ball was in their court, and I knew with grim certainty that they wouldn't like what they found there. The phone call with my mother was the beginning of the storm. Within hours, my phone was bombarded. Calls from Emily, texts from Ben, even a furious voicemail from my father, which I deleted without listening. They were a flurry of anger, disbelief, and desperate belated attempts at justification. Emily's texts swung wildly between accusations. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to us? Emotional manipulation. Mom is heartbroken. And desperate pleading. Please, Alex, you can still change it back. Ben was more direct, focusing on the financial aspect. That's a huge amount, Alex. Do you know how much that could have helped us? They talked about it as if it was their money, a guaranteed inheritance they were entitled to, regardless of how they treated me. I didn't reply to any of them. I let the storm rage around me, a silent, unwavering pillar. My phone buzzed constantly, but I kept it on silent, facing down on my nightstand. I focused on my recovery, on the quiet support of David and Maria, who brought me homemade soup and sat with me, listening, simply listening. The full weight of what I had done settled over me. It wasn't about revenge in the sense of wishing them ill. It was about justice, about drawing a line they could not ignore. They had chosen to discard me emotionally, and in doing so, they had also discarded any claim to my material legacy. It was a harsh lesson, but one they had forced my hand to teach. My mother called again later that evening. I answered this time, steeling myself. Her voice was no longer angry, but tearful and laced with something that sounded like genuine regret. Alex, she sobbed. Please, we miss you. Why are you doing this? We're your family. You made your choices, Mom, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion she was trying to elicit. You chose to cut me out. You chose to replace me. You chose to ignore me when I reached out. Now you are facing the consequences of those choices. But family doesn't do this to each other, she cried. No, Mum, I corrected her gently but firmly. Family doesn't cut each other out of their lives without a word. Family doesn't replace each other like they're a broken appliance. Family doesn't ignore calls and texts for months on end. You broke the family, Mom, not me. The line was quiet for a long moment, then a weary sigh. What do you want, Alex? She asked, her voice small. What will it take? It's not about what I want anymore, Mom, I said. It's about what you did, and what I did in response. The changes are permanent. My life is moving forward without you. And so is my legacy. I found new connections, new purpose. And I am okay. I heard a sniffle on the other end. I don't understand, she whispered. No, Mom, you don't, I said. And I don't think you ever will, but that's okay. I've accepted that. You chose a family that was easier, less drama. And I've chosen a future that's meaningful to me. A future where my resources will genuinely help others, not just maintain the comfort of those who abandoned me. I ended the call, the finality of it hanging in the air. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. It was about closure. I had said my piece, explained my actions, and stood firm. life for me continued on its new path. My recovery from surgery was steady. My friendships deepened. My photography class became a true passion. I found a sense of peace that was deeper than I had ever known. A peace born from self-respect and the quiet power of having taken back control of my own now. I still saw occasional social media updates from Emily or Beth. Their lives continued, seemingly unaffected in the day-to-day. But I knew, with grim certainty, that the knowledge of my changed beneficiaries would be a silent, nagging presence in their minds. A tangible consequence, a stark reminder of the cost of their emotional neglect. They might not show it, they might not acknowledge it, but the seed of regret, of loss had been planted. I had lost my family, the one I was born into. The heartbreak of that loss would always be a part of me, a deep scar that reminded me of the fragility of even the strongest bonds. But in losing them, I had found myself. I had found my voice. I had found my strength. And I had learned that true family wasn't about blood. It was about connection, respect, and unconditional love. And my future, my legacy, would now be dedicated to those values, to a world that truly deserved my investment. My story was no longer one of silent suffering, but one of quiet triumph. And I was ready for whatever came next.